Glad to know you're with us on Early Exchange this beautiful Wednesday morning. Now let's talk about shipments of illegal shipments of waste from Europe or other parts of the world to developing countries. Before we came back on air, there was a small conversation that ensued. And while we're talking about waste, somebody said, I won't tell you who the somebody is, that it depends on what you call waste. If what is waste for one person turns out to be something that is still valuable to the other, well, that's another part of the conversation.
But the trust of this story is the European Union is raising concerns as regards the shipment of e-waste to developing countries, which Nigeria is also part of the issue here. Behind the scene, we're making a conversation, a kind of joke as regards, okay, why do we make Africa or developing countries the dumping ground for waste? There are two conversations, there are two sides to it. What some people consider to be a problem can also be opportunities, which is why we're having this kind of conversation to expand and also look at the business opportunities that could arise for these developing countries, because they've been targeted. You just discover that you've used phones for years and then you choose to trash it or dump it somewhere. Don't be surprised that you find it in another continent being deployed into something that's being recycled. Now, some of these disposable waste and some of these things have their end use, which is also part of the business gains in all this. But the concern is even the ones that illegally ought not to be in developing countries, they find their ways here, which is also part of what EU is talking about, not just creating the right environment for the investment into these raw materials. But it's also important to observe laws or framework as regards this, because once it becomes illegal, there are certain provisions, secretarial, as regards what you need to import or export to a particular place. And if those rules are not being obeyed, then it becomes illegal. But here is also another, on the other side, opportunities for these developing countries to take advantage of these raw materials. In every problem, there are blessings. And if that's the way entrepreneurs are wired, when you see problems, you also see opportunities, that are enlaced or laced in those problems. So which is why developing countries can also take advantage of these in doing proper recycling. And then there are several end products you could get from recycling of some of these disposable products and some of these raw materials.
Well, this analogy of yours, that in every problem there are blessings. We'd like to get to
Which
the
is similar to
blessings
your name.
inherent. But I am not in that kind of problem. So, a joke, right? Really, by the way. But this problem or blessing being in problems of waste being shipped to developing countries. We'll get to that, but I understand that we also have Dr. Kayode joining us virtually on this conversation right now. We'll bring him later, Dr. Dayo Kayode, who is a socio-political technocrat, will be joining the conversation in a bit. Before that time, you've talked about what is not useful to those in developed countries being shipped to developing countries, and then they are seen as blessings and they are recycled. The question is, are they recycled or they are used because such products are not available in developing countries because of the unavailability of technology to make them? So when they're shipped as waste, they come in cheap. Is that the blessing you're referring to?
No, what I'm saying is the what you make of these materials. It is one thing for you to have what you call raw materials to production. It is one thing to use your creativity and initiative to turn it into something meaningful and productive and something that could fetch money. That's the idea I'm trying to bring. For instance, there are some of these disposable waste that when converted, you could get proper product from them. And that's why it's important to have the right investment. I get your point, whereby the issue of concerns as regards the legality or illegality of this. But what I'm also trying to paint is, yes, we might see it as developing countries becoming the dumping ground in this situation. But the point is, why are these things or these exporters having concerns about developing countries? Because there are opportunities here. And not just because of the opportunities, they have also seen window to export these things here because of lack of regulation and also because of the loopholes in our system. So they take advantage of this to bring some of this e-waste, even some of them illegally, into our country. Could be via sea, it could be via whatever means, because the environment is porous. And so it's easier for someone, because of lack of standard and regulation, to bring these things in. But what I'm saying is, somehow, because of the peculiarity of the environment, you might not have control of how these things get to your country. In fact, some of them, they ended up being waste as well, or ended up as waste, or not being recycled or used, which is also why it's important to create the right framework for these things to be achieved. Whereby some of these things, when they get to shore of these developing countries, they don't just end up there constituting another nuisance to the environment or another problem to the society, but they are being utilized in a way that the society will even benefit from it, which is why the proper planning or framework is needed in achieving this. You also understand that if you have a porous border, for instance, which is peculiar to most developing countries, anything could find its way to your country. In a situation that most of you have the official route to your country, you have the unofficial route, even some of them that have not been discovered. And so if you are in a place like Africa, where the issue of cross-border, it's of concern. So it's easier for these things to get across to some of these developing countries, which is also part of the issue. So you have the issue of control as well, to see how these things, in the first place, you create a framework where they don't get to your country. And if peradventure they get to your country, you have to maximize them and use them properly, which is why the internal mechanism is also needs to be strengthened. This idea, it's all about, in everything you spot business opportunities. For us, that's why our obligation is to shape policy, to see how we can shape these things, and for investors to see opportunities here, for business owners, for entrepreneurs to see opportunity in these ways that can be converted or recycled into making money.
Well, I do not have issues with opportunities. When we talk about waste, there are internally generated waste here that can be recycled. But when waste are shipped from one country to another because they see the other country as being less developed, as a dumping ground, and where there isn't much knowledge about the fact that that is waste, because truly nobody will ship waste and another accept it as waste if they know or if they consider it to be waste. Fact is, some of these items are not considered waste, even though where they come from, they're waste. They're considered as maybe fairly used item, given different names, and so they're even well sought after. They're embraced. So where they would not pass through the legal means, because if they pass through the legal means, they will be identified as waste. They're smuggled. There are those who are complicit in the trade, those who are in the developing countries complicit in the trade because they find it lucrative. They find these items useful.
Even cheaper, because a good reference is
cheaper,
what you call
even, yes.
UK used phones here.
Yes, that's why I said they're called different names. Some of them called fairly used items. And because you associate the name of developed countries to it, they become well sought after. Imagine, say, UK used phones, or UK used this, American used electronics. Because you think, or because the developing countries think that these countries have better technology, they have better manufactured standard items. So when the used ones are being shipped down, they should be of better quality than the ones that may be assembled or produced in Nigeria or in other African countries or other less developed countries. So they embrace them. And in the markets, they would perhaps do better in terms of demand. They would get higher demand than those that are produced from scratch in the developed countries. So there's a problem. Now, the EU is trying to enforce stricter regulations, but the issue is, while the EU tried to do its bit by enforcing stricter regulations and trying to ensure that there is traceability of companies, of people who indulge in the waste trade, there is the second part to it, which is the response of these developing countries that the EU is trying to salvage. What would they do next? Does that make smuggling more of a big deal now? Does it mean that these items become more expensive in the markets? Because recall I mentioned that there is a high demand for them. When you go over to Computer Village, for instance, and then you want to buy items, some of the items there that people seek for are actually waste from other countries. Perhaps you've heard of the phrase American dustbin. Oh, yes, because even the importers of these items know that some of these things are waste and some of them were actually dumped as waste, but they pack all of them together and sell. Because sometimes you go to this fairly used market and you're seeing the items, you're like, oh, you mean people actually sold this because they look like scrap. But somebody comes and negotiates for it, buys them, takes them to use. Which brings to the fore the underlying issue, which is poverty and underdevelopment.
Yeah, I agree with you. The economic factor is also playing a role here, where we are in a time where people are going through hard times economically and financially, where people's earnings or revenue are being eroded, or the purchasing power as a result of the economic realities. So yeah, naturally we expect the demand for some of this product because of their high quality and the fact that they comes in cheap or cheaper. Now, a reference is the one you made now, the UK used phones. Why do you think people go for that? UK used phone has a standard, which also, if you look at it, compared to a brand new one, people might not be able to afford it. But because they value the standard, they might likely go for, the fairly used ones. And in other clime, they call it tokumbo, whatever it is, because they feel it's cheaper compared to the brand new one. And so their purchasing power is being eroded because of the economic realities, loss of revenue or not having the right employment or poverty or whatever it is. And now they are in between two options to choose the brand new one or the fairly used one. So that's why most of these products are in high demand, because they are cheaper and because people don't have the luxury of finance to play around with in getting the first grade. And so they decide to go for this thing to earn their living or create what we call survivor. Because some of these products are also very crucial, like we talk about phones, electronics, and the rest of them. So people do that. And because of the peculiarity of the economic reality in these developing countries, which the issue of poverty, literacy, or illiteracy, or the issue of inflation it's very high. So the issue of purchasing power is being eroded. And so they are compelled to go for some of these products because of the economic factors and the financial conditions they found themselves.
In fact, Femi, you know, as we're having this conversation, some
Yeah.
persons may not be happy because they're tying it to what will be the implications. So at the end of the day, these laws, regulations become stricter. So that means that this product becomes scarce in the market and become more expensive for the common man.
Yeah, that's it. But it's the reality that we just have to talk about. But let's shift the conversation to Dr. Dayo Kayode. Is joining us virtually. He's a technocrat. Dr. Dayo Kayode, glad to see you again. I hope you can hear me, Dr. Dayo Kayode. All right, Alan, we need to go on a short break now for us to reconnect with our guests. They are ready, but we just need to get them set for this conversation. Let's go on a short break. Well, okay. Alan, Dr. Dayo Kayode, I hope you can hear me now.
I'm hearing you clearly. Are you hearing me too?
Clearly now I can hear you. Glad you have joined us on the Early Exchange once again. Good to see you.
Yes, good being with you. How are you?
We are still in business of shaping policy and will always be. Glad you have joined us. So let's get to the conversation. Now we're talking about shipment of waste to developing countries, and the European Union is raising concerns as regards tons, millions of tons of waste that are being shipped to developing countries. My question is, why do you think developing countries are of interest to this kind of development, this kind of trade, if I may put it that way? Is it not looking like developing countries are rather becoming the dumping grounds for these wastes? Talk to us.
You see, let's first of all allow our listeners to understand what waste are, so that they won't be taking it to be part of those toxic waste that were being dumped somewhere in very close to Saple the other time, So we can understand waste if we see it from the perspective of those items, those products that are no more You have to underline that. No more useful to the owners. No more useful to the owners. For instance, when you go to developed countries, all those offices there, most of the offices there, they want to change their furniture. They want to change their equipment. They want to change some of their facilities. Maybe every 2 or 3 years. They will call removers to come and remove those things. And then what they do with it is none of their business. Just clean my office. Then they replace it with new ones. Those things are turned to be waste for them. But mark you, those things are not waste for some other people. It's just like in our litter bins here that we put outside. You see some of these guys going there and then searching, they call it dustbin, searching for things that they know they can still use, even here in Nigeria. So when you understand waste in that perspective, then you know where we're coming from and where we are heading to. Now, when you look at it from that perspective, let us take, for instance, refrigerators or some of these electronic equipments that they ship down here. There's a particular place that I know very well in London, Southeast London. They call it Deptford Market. Every Wednesday, when you get there 5 a.m., you will see tons of all these things there. You'll be hearing them, £1, £1. There is nothing you buy here that is higher than £5. And when you bring them down here, they look like new. They call them unserviceable. When you are selling them, I go to Apapa, coconut. You see a whole load of them being sold there. When you buy again there, it is to your own peril if it doesn't work, because it's nobody's business. They call it untested. So what I'm saying in essence is, over there in Europe, they are developed. They have more than enough that they can use at any point in time. Okay, let me also give you another example. When you go to shops in America or in Europe, anywhere over there, and you are buying a brand new shirt, they will tell you, do you want the one that has been removed from the pack? The one that are some that are still in the pack? Those that have been removed from the pack that somebody has tested, even though it's new, will be cheaper than the one that you see have inside the pack. There are other ones that maybe the button, one of the buttons is losing. Those ones too will be cheaper than those that their buttons are complete. So you can say there they have standard, but here anything goes. All those things, we try and pack them there and we ship them down here by ourselves. And because we still find them very useful, serviceable for us, here we won't call them waste. But it's so unfortunate again. We in the third world, especially in Africa, we will go there and pack everything. Whether they are still working or they are not working, we still pack them down here. And at the end of the day, they turn out to be a huge nuisance to our environment.
All right, talking about them being nuisance to our environment, the role of those within our environment in this trade. So while the EU does their bit to ensure that there is restriction in this kind of trade, what can be done internally to restrict those who participate in this kind of trade within our environment?
Yes, over there, and there are various spots there, the EU can do a lot of restraints in bringing them here. But here, it will be very, very difficult to restrain them. Why? Because our borders are very porous. That's number one. Number two, those people that are manning our borders, the enforcement agencies, have been tagged to be very corrupt. Especially in Nigeria here, there is no sector that is not corrupt. Go there and find out yourself. So because of that, all those things will still be finding their ways into our environment. If we don't take seriously to manning our borders effectively and efficiently, there is no way we'll be able to curb it as it will be curbed by the EU.
For our audience to have better perspective, Dr. Kayode, I would like you to provide more insight as regards the legality when it comes to shipment of waste here. At what point does the issue of shipment of waste constitute illegality? What are the legal issues that are popping up when it comes to shipment of waste to these developing countries?
You see, there are standards. There are standards of all these goods that can be shipped out from various countries. While also there are standards to all these goods that can be shipped into various countries. Let me explain. Let us take UK, for example. When they packed out items, commodities that a particular house or a particular office is no more in need of, they are not forcing you. They are not forcing you to pack these things to your country. They themselves, they are looking for how to make their own environment clean. And they see all those things constituting nuisance, various forms of nuisances to their environment. So between you and me, when you see somebody packing all those things from your environment, making your environment to be cleaner, will you be fighting such a person? You wouldn't. It is here in Nigeria that our own standard organization, because we have Nigeria Standard Organization here, that are supposed to live up to their expectation. Because how can you allow some of these products, some of these items that are not working, that are bad already, to enter into this country? Imagine some people, they will go as far as going to dump sites to be bringing in vehicles that had been cut off. And they will bring them here. They will go to the panel beater and then be joining them as scraps. By the time they finish, they paint it. They will say they are buying Tokumbo. Put that kind of a car on the road, the chassis will just break off. So these are issues. It's our own standard organization, our customs, that are supposed to live up to their own billings for us to be able to curb the incessant dumping of this waste into our nation.
Dr. Kayode, you understand that this is business for people already. Some people have been into this trade for several years. So if the EU is doing something, the Nigerian government, governments of different countries, of developed countries, might as well make policies, or if they already have policies, begin the strict enforcement of these policies, which means bad business for such people.
The policies
Why
are there
don't
already.
we
The
tend
policies are
to
there.
those in this type of business so they don't fight back? Should there be a way of moving them to another kind of business? Should there be a way of sanitizing the business that, yes, you can deal on fairly used item, but there is a standard to this?
You see, there is no country that they don't deal with fairly used items. There is no country. Even in the UK we are talking about, even in America, they deal with fairly used products. There are shops in America, in UK, in Belgium, in France, that I have visited. And what they do there is selling of fairly used products. But there are standards. There are standards. Unlike here, no standard. Over there, they follow their standard. Because if you are caught, in fact, you remember the day you were born. Unlike here, it's not that we don't have standards. We have standards. But who are there to enforce it? Who are there to enforce it? The enforcement agents, are they not also conniving in the trade? Those that are supposed to be controlling, are they really controlling? Do they even know what they are supposed to do? Have they been allowing money to pass through hands? These are issues. Even then, even at that, when they are being caught, when some are being caught, were they properly sanctioned? Don't they release them based on the people they know? Their godfathers? These are issues. So not until when we'll tackle these institutional problems in enforcing those standards, honestly, we ain't going to get nowhere.
So, Kayode, as a follow-up to that, talking about the issue of enforcing standard and regulation, let me make reference to a statement credited to an anti-waste activist in Tunisia, where he said, he's trying to paint a picture of what you're talking about now. And from his statement, he said, we're talking about a network of what is known as eco-mafia, which also involve companies and politicians. Now, how does this paint a picture of how challenging it is to enforce the issue of regulation and standard as regards this development? You talked about connivance between some people, but this guy is saying it's like an eco-mafia of people comprising of politicians, agencies. Give us a picture of how bad it is, and then what can be done to curtail this kind of development in Africa.
All right, let me give you this. Let me give you this example. Let me give you this example. Assuming I am into the business. All right. And you, as a known person, is a custom officer. And my goods, which are not stolen, which I don't have illicit drugs there, are now being detained by your men at the port. And I decide to call you. Will you not come in? You definitely come in and ask them to release my goods, because we know where we are going to meet later. When we meet at the club, we share bottles of beer together. Or at the end of the day, money will pass through hands. That is one. Two, remember, few years back, that a top senator brought in some vehicles and duties were not paid. And he was now being asked to come and pay the duties thereafter. In the first instance, why was the duty not paid? Why? Because man, no man. Why was he asked to go and pay that duty at that time? Because he was stepping on the toes of some people. We are all privy to that scenario here. So it is difficult for the eco mafia to be broken, in as much as we have the people that are supposed to implement the rules and regulations, the standards. You have them in the business. You have politicians. You have them in the business. You have top government functionaries. You have them in the business. Then it will continue to thrive. You need to go through coconut, Ajeromi area, down to why do I call this place now? You know, Kirikiri area, Ajegunle, and then see how those areas are being messed up. Also go to Itire axis, enter Mushi, enter through the enter Idiaraba area, and you see the way the whole place is being messed up by waste, things that are not useful. They are there. Then you will pity this country. I'm still talking about Lagos. I'm not talking about other cities like Warri. Go to Warri. Go to Ibadan. Go to Ilesha, Oshogbo. Do you understand? You see all these things there, messing our environment up. So we need a purposeful leader. Somebody who will take the bull by the horn and say, okay, no matter whose ox is God, I don't want to give a hoot. This thing must be controlled. But then, another thing is this. Permit me to say this in Yoruba. You know? So, when the head of the fish is rotten, what do you expect?
That's it, from this angle. So people go to markets where fairly used items are sold for various reasons. One of them could be that they are cheaper. Another could be that they are of better standard or quality than even the new items that are found in the market. Which brings me to my question. Why is there a disparity in the quality of goods shipped to developing countries than those in developed countries?
It's not purposeful from there. It is because of our own makeup that is causing it. Remember, the first tag buses issue at that time. That somebody in this country went there, instead of buying new vehicles, asked the Igbo people to refurbish those buses, and that one shook his head. But these people are fraudulent, and he's asking for receipts of new vehicles. Meanwhile, he was buying refurbished vehicles. I think you remember. Well, we were all in this country then. So it's not their fault. It's our own fault. It's our own making. Whereby you will go there, you ask them to make substandard products for you and bring it to Nigeria. And all these things are happening. I will not deceive you, because we have still not been able to get our acts together when it comes to leadership in this country. When you have a purposeful leader who is ready to do away with most of this mess that we are in, then you see everything will fall in place. I will give you an example. Let Professor Akiyoli, the former DG of NAFDA, while she was there, look at what happened in the pharmaceutical industry. Look at the revolution that happened within the pharmaceutical industry. Do we still have such now? That is a purposeful leader, intentional leader, technical leader. How many of them do we have today who can stand on their feet and say, yes, enough is enough. This rot must stop?
All right,
and
great. Interesting point
all
there, Dr. Kayode. Because of our time, we would like us to talk about the solutions now. The issue raised by the European Union is the concern as regards the capacity of some of these developing countries when it comes to the issue of infrastructure and also processing and recycling capacity, which if you look at some of these developing countries, they don't have that capacity. Now, talking about the solution to this problem now, how can the right investment be attracted, by these developing countries who are battling with this waste, annually, yet they do not have the capacity to process or recycle them? How can they attract the right investment to tackling the lack of capacity when it comes to infrastructure, processing, and recycling?
Yes. You remember during Baba Jakonde's tenure in Lagos State, he was coming up with such an investment to the extent that we were having a recycling infrastructure somewhere in Oshodi. It was also developing where we can be crushing some of these items and then turning them into metals and iron rods. The question is, where are all these facilities today? It is because we don't have the enabling environment. We don't have the will. The capacity is there, my brother. We have the capacity. We have the technical know-how, but the will is not there. Just like Bob Marley said, where there is a will, there will always be a way. Now the question is, how do we have that will? That will can always come up when we have a purposeful leader, an intentional leader. That's the only solution. When you have that, every other thing will fall in place. And then you see even foreign investors coming in. I don't know if you have ever seen all these bowler boys picking up waste on the roads here and there. Go and look at where they always dump this waste and how they ship them out. Where are they shipping them to? What are they using those things to do where they are shipping them to? Go to Agege, you see them there. Go to Agege. I drove past one of their sites. Was it not about early last week or so? Packing trailers out and then putting them into containers, shipping them out to China. What are they turning them to there? Are we saying we cannot do same here? Are we not saying we cannot turn all this?
All right,
this
thank you
around
so
here?
much, Dr. Dayo Kayode, for your thoughts this morning on the conversation. We do hope that the will be there, so there's a way to tackle this menace of waste trading. It doesn't look good on developing countries. It doesn't benefit developing countries because we know that there are health and environmental implications of this that are negative.
It's my player bill, though. Enjoy the rest of your day.
We've been talking with Dr. Dayo Kayode, who's a socio-political technocrat, and we're looking at EU's move to tackle the issue of illegal shipment of waste to developing countries. Well, my thoughts on this are that we should understand as developing countries that while it may look cheap, the consequence of allowing this trade to continue do not at all favor developing countries. So we should do better and have the will, because even when we talk about recycling, yes, recycling is good, but I think that the countries that have generated the waste should do the recycling and not ship them over to other countries to help them do the recycling or help them scavenge for these things, ship them back so they can do the recycling. We should also insist on having good standards, and the standard organization of Nigeria and that of other countries can do well in this bed. I'm Blessing Aiche. The show returns tomorrow, 8 p.m. West African time. Follow us on the social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Leave a comment, like, and of course share. And then you can visit this edition of Early Exchange on our YouTube channel at Soc News TV, as well as all the programs from Soc News TV. Have yourself a great day.
All right, the essence of this conversation is also to create a platform for investors to see the opportunities in shipment of waste, which is what we've done. It's obvious now there's a gap when it comes to the issue of infrastructure and recycling in Africa, which can be a form of investment for any investor watching this program. Don't forget, the conversation continues on our social media platforms, Facebook, X, and at YouTube. Just search for at Soc News TV. And then Market Insight comes up at 11. As Early Exchange will return tomorrow, bigger and better. I'm Femi Ayodele. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.